Hello and welcome again. Today's analysis is going to focus on two movies, Jonny Guitar and Bony and Clyde. Let's start with Jonny Guitar. Jonny Guitar is a movie directed by Nicholas Ray and starring Joanne Crawford. So, practically seen, Jonny Guitar is in this case an interesting movie to analyze out of the simple reason that it changes around the order of who the protagonist is and who the hero is at the time. Well, today more movies do that, but at the time it was something completely new. Now, what am I actually talking about here is the simple fact that in a Western, which Jonny Guitar is, you have an outlaw hero or some sort of tough, really manly gunfighter and a innocent saloon girl. What Jonny Guitar does very cleverly is that they switch the roles around. So practically the really tough, masculine gunslinger is actually a woman, played by Joanne Crawford. And the innocent saloon girl in this case is Jonny Guitar, a man and the main protagonist of the story. What makes Jonny Guitar even more interesting is that it is a political movie. Now, what I mean by this is that you have to transfer yourself back at the time of the Cold War. So practically, what was happening back at that time, at least in America, was that they had a practical communist paranoia. So practically they were like, communists there, and communists out of the country. And practically seen, that was called McCarthyism. Now, McCarthyism is practically blaming someone without actual evidence or proof. So practically seen, it's like me saying, you stole this without me actually having proof. Now, this actually happens in Jonny Guitar, because the band of alter egos, led by the dancing kid, are wrongly blamed for the shooting of a postcoach and practically robbing it, which practically culminates into them robbing a bank and them practically being the bad guys. We think in the first few minutes of the movie that they're actually the bad guys. However, and this is what Jonny Guitar also does really brilliantly, is that the real antagonist of the story, the rival of Joanne Crawford, also a woman, is revealed. So practically, see, she's like, she did it! So practically, she's blaming Joanne Crawford, or at least the role that she plays, the girl in Jonny Guitar, the manly girl in Jonny Guitar, for practically everything, because she wants her to disappear from the land. So practically what she does is that she goes to the townfolk and rallies them up against Joanne Crawford and Jonny Guitar and the gang of the dancing kid. So this is what is called McCarthyism. And this movie is against McCarthyism, so anti-McCarthyistic. They're just saying, how stupid are people to practically accuse innocent people of doing something which they actually never did. Now, fun fact to the side, actually the director of this film, Nicholas Ray, chose the characters very, very specifically. For example, Joanne Crawford and her opposing partner, so the antagonist, were actually enemies in real life because they were fighting over a boyfriend. I think the real story is that Joanne Crawford was dating the ex of the woman who played the antagonist. So practically seen a bit of the violence which is seen on screen is actually meant literally serious, so which makes these two a really interesting bunch to throw together. Now, coming to Bony and Clyde. Now, Bony and Clyde is based upon a real event. Practically, Bony and Clyde were real bank robbers who practically as the name said, already robbed banks. Now, what makes this interesting is that the producer, Warren Beatley, actually played Bony in the movie. No, sorry, Clyde, actually. Sorry. It's always... you can get so confused between these two. So, he played Clyde in the movie. So, practically seen, Clyde is depicted as not really that tough of a man. You know, he tries to impress Bony with his guns and his cool attitude, but practically seen, it is an example of the dark feminine taking over of him. And practically that ends in Bony and Clyde being gunned down by police in a very brutal way. Now, the brutal part of it is something which was never shown that strongly on screen before, because literally they were just made into Swiss cheese by these local sheriffs. So practically seen, something like that was, as I said before, never seen on screen, so it was quite shocking. But what's interesting is that if you compare these two movies, again, we have very strong feminine characters. Just that one, it ends pretty happy with Joan Crawford and Jonny Guitar getting together, and one doesn't end very happy with Bony and Clyde being shot. Now, practically seen, Jonny Guitar does not get consumed by the dark feminine. The antagonist, on the other hand, is the manifestation of this dark feminism, because she practically is evil, so to speak. She is the antagonist. Whilst Clyde, on the other hand, is not really made into a man. And this is also, as said before, shown through the film, because he has trouble making love to Bony. You know, he's always like hesitating, not really, you know, like sure of himself, and that's practically the example of dark feminism taking over. To further add onto this analysis, Bony and Clyde can also be compared to Un Boon de Souffle, are practically two gangster movies. Now, what makes Bony and Clyde so significant is that it actually appeared 1 decade later than Jonny Guitar. However, it was part of the American national cinema, which influenced the appealing way. Bony and Clyde were a part of this new cinema. Now, what new cinema practically means is that there's violence, sex, and art, which practically seen, as said before, was that scene of them getting shot. That was the violence, and then there was the sex, and it was also artistic, because the colors were a bit, you know, they were bright, they were colorful, they were practically seen artistic. So practically seen, Bony and Clyde is important to the American cinema because it's a crucial movie for the new American wave. The new package system, which includes an A-list director and an A-star producer, high names in the based upon actors, and practically it goes from there. But also there's an American new wave influence, the French new wave, and then there's the European new wave, as said before. So practically seen, it all started from there. So practically seen, that would be all for today. Thank you very much for listening, and stay tuned.